Hey, welcome. Thank you for joining us for our whole new, brand new season of Talking Church. And as you can see, we've got a brand new set, and the team have done so well in creating this next set and this next season of Talking Church. And we are so glad that you're joining with us. And we actually have a live studio audience now. And,
back in the day.
Yeah, come on, give us a cheer live. There we go. We've got a live studio audience.
That's not canned applause.
No, that's real there. Yeah, it's not like press a button there. And it's really exciting. So we're going to be looking at this season at different subjects about Talking Church. And today I am joined by Pastor Stephen Carey, who is the pastor of our Havant congregation, which is obviously in Havant. Do you want to say hi, Steve?
Hi, good to see you all. And it's going to be good discussion.
Yeah, it is. And so today is the new season of Talking Church with The Forge. And Forge is our new ministry school that's literally started this week. We had our inductions last week, and this week the students have gathered. And we're excited about what God's going to be doing in Forge Ministry School. Yeah. And it's not too early to say to people, maybe you need to get ready for next year. Now, this year, we're off and running. You missed the boat, but not next year. Yep. Maybe you want to dedicate a year of your life to Forge Ministry School and what God can do in fashioning your life for his purposes. So there you go. So over the course of this season, you're going to be hearing from different students from our Forge Ministry School. But today, we are so conscious that we are coming off of the back of a huge day yesterday. Now, I know we've got people watching from the United States. God bless you. So good that you're up so early watching us today. But the majority of people will be watching from the United Kingdom. Yeah. And obviously, yesterday was a huge, massive day for us.
It's momentous, wasn't it?
It was, it was once in a lifetime. It was massive. Where we... was it celebrated, was it or respected, or took a moment to all watch across the nation? And they reckon it was the most watched thing, the funeral of our Queen Elizabeth II. And what a funeral it was.
That's amazing.
I was one of those people. I started watching at like 10:30. I was in the whole journey.
All the way through.
I was there the whole journey. I couldn't leave the couch. You know, the Englishman in me just was like, I'm not going anywhere. And then I realised that there were two actual funeral services. I'm like, I am in this. How about you? Did you watch the whole thing?
Yeah, went jogging in the morning, then came back and then watched it from then. And then the girls needed to go out to the park and we needed to get them out of the house. So we went, a bit where the car was just driving. I was like, I can miss a car just driving down roads. I can see that any time. But the rest of it, we watched it from beginning to end.
Didn't England do an incredible
Great
job?
Britain, just in case Roddy's watching
Great Britain,
upset,
in case the Scots are watching. Didn't Great Britain do an incredible job?
It was amazing.
Of honouring somebody that was worthy of honour.
I think other countries look and think, what on earth is this about? But it's just what it makes us who we are, very much as a nation.
It really does. It really showed our love for a monarchy.
Yeah.
And again, if you're not from England, sometimes that's hard to understand. Even Pastor Gina's originally from America. She's lived here now for around 30 years. But it was still different to what she grew up understanding, having a president. That our Queen is not a president. Our president or the president would be similar to our prime minister, but the Queen is completely different, isn't it? For us, it was a massive time. I had friends contacting me from the US saying they were watching it there and stuff like that. But I could just sense in conversations with people that weren't in England or not from England, they didn't fully get it.
And I think even some people within England, you've got some people who are quite Republican in their views, and some people think, what is the point of monarchy? And I think even over the last week, some of those people it was underlined, actually, this is the reason why we have what we have, and the stability that it brings, especially somebody like her, over such a long period of time.
What was your takeaway? I mean, this is 10 days of mourning. For me, I've just been watching and learning so much myself, even from that moment over a week ago when they went into the crown room. That had never been seen. That had never been seen because of media and the Queen's long reign of 70-odd years, where they went into the crown room and the seals were given. The authority was passed over. There was
all the stuff that's happened for generations and years, but people had never seen it before. And even
yesterday at that final the burial point in Windsor Castle where they snapped the rod and presented. We'd never seen that before. What was your takeaway, Steve, from the Queen's funeral?
I think there was so much. I mean, it was just constantly moving on. There was so many different things happening. I think, firstly, it spoke of who she was in terms of the people who'd come from all around the world. The audience. I mean, I don't think they've said what the audience was yet, but it'll be billions around the world. Everybody kind of tuned in for it. So I think it spoke a lot about her. But then I just loved the way so much of it pointed to Jesus. So much of it, it wasn't because this is what we do in this nation. It was because of her life and her faith, and it was genuine.
It really was.
I think that shone through, really.
And didn't the Archbishop of Canterbury do an incredible job presenting the thoughts of the gospel?
What do you say in 5 minutes in such a huge occasion? There's always going to be people who say, oh, he should have said this, he should have said that. But I think it was brilliant what he communicated.
I thought he did an amazing job. And at the end there, left it very clear, if you want to see the Queen again, follow the Jesus she followed. Which was very amazing. That come on, you can. That's strong. That was a strong statement.
I felt it was very clear. I felt it was very Jesus-centered. It wasn't, religious in the sense of just doing it for the sake of it. It was very much pinpointing towards Jesus.
And obviously for us in England, it's not just the burial of the Queen and the respect and the honour that goes with that. It's now the coronation and the coming in and the present now rule and reign of King Charles III. We have a king now, and even when they were singing yesterday, God Save the King, it just sounds so unusual. But I think my takeaway would be the same, Steve. Two things. Number one, it helped me to look at monarchy, kingship, and then apply that to Jesus, my King. There was so much that went on. The king on the throne room, the honour that was given. But I thought, oh my goodness, this is for an earthly queen or monarch. How much more our King, Jesus Christ? The other thing that totally blessed my socks off was, you're right in what you say, that the whole course of yesterday pointed and honoured the King of Kings that was her King, Jesus Christ. I don't think at the end of it, I was like, you couldn't have asked, if you're a Christian, you couldn't have asked for a more Christ-centric or Christ-focused. It's like the whole thing pointed to, she's gone to be with her King, Jesus. Now, I loved how the funeral drew our attention very much, whether you were saved or unsaved, to the King of all kings, the great King, Jesus Christ. Were there any parallels that you saw, but when you saw how we responded to monarchy on earth and the crossover?
I think there was huge. I mean, there's huge parallels, firstly, between her life and Jesus. And I think I was thinking about this over the last 10 days, looking at all the different, like you, there's been so many different ceremonies and so many different things that have happened. And a lot of that is symbolic. But actually, when you look at it, there was a lot of tradition in her that came from watching other kings and queens. But actually, more and more, when I look at it, she modelled her royalty and what it was to be a monarch on who Jesus was as king.
She really did.
Even down to the servant thing. And they were talking the other day about how she signed so many of her letters, your servant. She could have, your queen or the one in charge, but your servant was her heartbeat and how she would actually sign off her letters. And I think she very much modelled, and I don't think people really understood it, but how much she modelled her authority on the authority of Jesus and what it meant to be a ruler.
And she knew when she was that young lady that there was an anointing that came on her. She took that seriously.
Well, she went and, when they were talking about this, she went and knelt and prayed silently before coming and taking the crown. And so she surrendered her ruleship to the King of Kings before actually then going, okay, this is now my role.
And it was all those comments yesterday, wasn't it? Stuff you never knew. We've got June from America saying that she watched it all yesterday and learned so much about the Queen, royalty, what it is for England to have a monarch. But again, to me, the biggest takeaway, and I was just so thankful for this, the whole thing pointed to the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, the great King. Now, I want us to talk a little bit today, Steve, about Christ as our King. I've got some titles for his kingship. But Jesus is our King. Now, as English folk from Great Britain, we acknowledge that we have an earthly king now, Charles III. But whether it was Queen Elizabeth II or Charles III, for us as Christians, believers, followers of Jesus Christ, we have, as the Queen did and acknowledged, a higher king.
That's right.
A king of kings or a king of queens.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at Jesus, we see that the Queen acknowledged him very much as her king, and I'm so thankful for that. But also I remember the quote of Queen Victoria. And it was
classic.
Queen Victoria's quote. Some people thought Queen Elizabeth had said it, but it was actually Queen Victoria's quote that Elizabeth had heard, where she said, "I long for the returning of the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, in my rule and reign, so that I may have the privilege of casting the crown that man's given me at the feet of Christ." Isn't that incredible?
It's amazing.
That the kings and the queens recognised him as the authority or the monarchy or the sovereign above them all. Any thoughts on that?
I think it just helps them to realise their place in it all.
Yeah.
Because again, the whole world is, you're the queen, you're the king, elevating them. And none of us understand what that must actually feel like, but actually to understand, no, I'm serving a higher king. I'm surrendered to a higher king. I think that just levels them, and I think that's what made the Queen who she was, because of her relationship with Jesus.
I think so. I did a quick scan through yesterday of some of the kings and queens that preceded Elizabeth, just in my own mind, who came where. You sit there, you're like, who was who, was who, and you can go right the way back because of our rich history. But there were kings that ruled our land that didn't acknowledge Christ.
Yeah.
They didn't acknowledge him. Yeah. And you saw that the land
you see the
suffered.
result of that.
Yeah. The righteousness in the land was different. But that's the same as the Old Testament, isn't it? Mm-hmm. When you read in the Old Testament, you have a king that loved God, a king that didn't, a king that loved God, a king that didn't.
And you saw the result of it in the land. And
the land was affected by it. And I think our land has been affected by a queen that didn't just believe in God, she loved God.
Yeah.
She loved God,
and how much, we'll never know how much she prayed for our nation, how much she, because she was a woman of prayer.
She was, yeah.
And how much she interceded on behalf of the nation in different situations and circumstances, massively.
Well, one of the key differences when we look at King Jesus, King of Kings, King of all kings, is he's eternal king.
Yeah.
That when we talk about Jesus, we talk about an eternal king, someone that has no end, or whose rule and reign will never end. There's no end to his rule and reign. It says in those verses in Isaiah that the government is on his shoulders. Yeah. Now, when we see Jesus Christ, eternal king, we know that there's never going to be another king.
Yeah. That's right.
It's Jesus forever.
It's not the Jesus era. It is everything's the Jesus era. Right. It's not.
It's not. We are in the reign of Christ.
Yeah.
It will always be the reign of Christ. Now, when we consider Jesus King of Kings, we also consider that he has rule and reign.
Yeah.
Where we look at the current monarchy of England, it's more these days about reign than rule.
A lot of it's symbolic in terms of the power. Everything's signed off by royalty, but actually it's not real power, it's symbolic power. And in a sense, we're talking about Jesus as king. There's a lot of believers who it's almost symbolic rather than real rule and reign. And I think that's what separates out those who are living for the kingdom of God and those who just have a notion of a God. Yeah. It's symbolic rather than actually real rule and reign.
Well, if you rewind history in England, there were times when the sovereign had
the power.
Rule and reign, which meant we acknowledge the reign of Queen Elizabeth II and we acknowledge now the reign of Charles III. Yeah. But there was a time back, if you go back a few kings, a few decades, generations, that a king or a queen didn't just have reign, they had rule.
And carried the authority.
That's right. Yeah. But if they said this isn't going to happen, it wasn't going to happen. Yeah. Where what we see now with a parliamentary system, similar to what America would experience with the way that they do politics, etc., is a lot of the rule of the country comes through Parliament. Yeah. And what we need to understand is when we look at King Jesus, it's not like that. Yeah. That King Jesus, who's eternal king, retains the reign forever. He's eternally the king, but also the rule. And I loved what you said. We're subjects now, that can acknowledge his reign. Oh, I believe in Jesus. I was born in a Christian country. Or we can be people that say, no, I acknowledge his rule as well.
And his authority in our lives.
And that's where everything changes, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Isn't that where it goes from conversion or convert to disciple?
Yep. Absolutely.
Because remember, Jesus, King of Kings, eternal King. I love that statement, Steve, where he says, you call me Lord, Lord, or King, King, but you don't do what I say. Mm. That's about reign and rule, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we can acknowledge him, but do we submit, yield? Are we subjects? Now, they often talk about us in England because we have a king.
That we're subjects.
But we're subjects.
But again, it's more symbolic than anything.
It is,
real.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Apart from moments like yesterday, where people are touched with the understanding of a monarchy, we can't be moved by moments. I think we need to say, all right, Jesus is our eternal king. He's not just, we're just not just acknowledging his eternal rule or reign, but his rule as well.
Yeah.
Lord, be king over my life.
And it's not up for debate whether he's king, because the reality of a monarchy is, if it was voted a certain way, then we would become a republic. It's not set in stone that, it could be voted. And I think a lot of the Commonwealth countries you might see turn into republics in the next few years or decades. But the reality is, with Jesus, it's not an option.
No.
Jesus is ruling and reigning, like you say, for eternity.
No one can impeach him.
No.
Often in other setups, presidents can be impeached.
Yeah.
You'll never impeach Jesus.
Yeah.
He can't be impeached. There's no one that can impeach him.
Yeah.
There's no successor.
Yeah, that's true.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
When we think we celebrate the rule and reign of a queen of 70-odd years of rule and reign.
Which is nothing in comparison to
where with
reality.
Christ, the king that she acknowledged as her king, he's our eternal king. That gives me such confidence. Mm-hmm. Again, they referred yesterday in the ceremonies to the book of Revelations.
Yeah.
Where everything comes under. But you know what really stood out to me yesterday, again, watching the part that took place in St. George's Chapel, was that moment where you actually see that in the book of Revelations, it says that Jesus will bring everything under his rule and reign, but then put it at the feet of the Father.
Yeah.
And often we miss that.
Yeah, it's true.
Sometimes we miss that bit, that Jesus, eternal King, will bring everything under submission
to the Father.
And then he will bring it and present it to the Father.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, because that's like the whole journey of the beginning of Genesis finding its ending.
Yeah.
In the beginning, the Father was over everything. Mm-hmm. Everything came from him and that was in him. And then we had the fall of man and all those things and the whole storyline. Yeah. But the end of the book, Revelation, tells us that Jesus, the eternal King, King of Kings, gets everything that went into rebellion, everything that was lost, that belonged to the Father. And sometimes in my mind, I thought it ended with Jesus. But actually, the book of Revelations and says when it's all subject, he presents it at the feet of the Father.
It's amazing.
Isn't it wonderful?
Love it.
I was watching, in the Crown Room about a week ago, all the Prime Ministers standing.
Oh, yeah.
And,
in front of a rope. And
and they had the King sitting on the throne.
Yeah.
And in my heart, I loved what I was watching, but I thought, man, I want to live my life so that one day when I stand before my eternal King, I'm standing there saying, I've been waiting for this moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't want him to be my king there. I want him to be my eternal, because eternal isn't just about never ending.
Yeah.
It's always
so here and now. Yeah, yeah.
And that's the decision we make. Again, I think it comes back to rule and reign.
Yeah.
Will we acknowledge reign or will we acknowledge rule? Here's another big one, Steve, which you already highlighted, that the Queen demonstrated so much. We see Jesus Christ as our eternal King, ever reigning. We see that he has rule and reign. The government is upon his shoulders. But he also is servant king.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Servant king.
Yeah.
What does that speak to you?
He just modelled it, didn't he, the way that he lived. And again, obviously, that's why when he came, he wasn't who they were expecting. They were expecting a very different kind of king. And he set around, no, this is what kingdom looks like. this is what it is to serve. And, as we're going through our family values as a church community, one of our things is that we're servant-hearted. And again, why? Not because that's an in thing, it's because that's who Jesus was. Yeah. And if we're going to be disciples, then we've got to be disciples who follow what it is to be a servant king. And I think, she knew that. The Queen very much knew servanthood. A lot of it's coming through, not from Christian commentators, but just from people, historians. They very much see her as a servant of the people. Yeah. And that was what was modelled by her Saviour Jesus, and what she just carried on through the way that she reigned.
Because the disciples did a journey of recognising him as king, didn't they?
Yeah.
It's amazing that, they put above his head on the cross, King of the Jews, but that was mockingly done.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's who he was, but he was also the King of the Gentiles. He was the King of all kings. Yeah. Yet, it's that moment I was thinking of in the upper room. He just taught on abiding in the vine. He's doing his last big masterclass before pressing the button and going to the Garden of Gethsemane and the walk of the cross, the passion of the Christ. And in that moment, he gets up, all right, and at this moment, they're beginning to see him as king. He gets up, takes a bowl and a towel, and washes their feet.
And most of us are like Peter, like, no, Lord, you can't do it. I just love when I love Peter when you read through the Gospel, because very often we see ourselves in that and his reaction. But it's that kind of, no, if you're a king, and it's almost like Peter couldn't get his head round, how can you be both at the same time? How can you be king and yet be servant? They'd only seen one or the other modelled to them. And in the person of Jesus, it's just a perfection of, what it is to be a servant king. And, Jesus didn't lord it over them. Jesus served and talked so much about what it was to be a servant and what it was to serve. And he modelled that for us, that actually that's the way, that if that's who our king is, that's what his kingdom looks like as well in our everyday life.
He was secure in his kingship.
Yeah.
He had nothing to prove. No. He knew where he'd come from, who he belonged to, where he was going, and what he was here to do. Yeah. It must have been mind-blowing that moment he took the bowl. Yeah. It's like, imagine, again, if our beloved Queen Elizabeth II suddenly in a meeting washed the feet of the people around her. Mm-hmm. People would, like you say, like Peter.
It'd be just like Peter, wouldn't it? It'd just be a modern day.
No, you can't wash my feet.
Yeah.
But yet Jesus responds and he says, well, unless you let me do this, unless you get the point that I'm a servant king, you have no part in me. Yeah. You have no part in my rule or reign. Yeah. And then the eccentric says, wash me and
everywhere.
Jesus is like, no, easy now. The feet, calm it down, tiger. Just the feet, all right? Yeah. It was the last lesson that the king was showing his subjects before he graduated to take his throne in heaven. Yeah. Now, Steve, you've got 3 beautiful girls. I've got 5 kiddies. Now, the last thing you say when you're going out for a night is the thing you want people to remember the most, right? The kids the most. Yeah. It's like, if you're going out for a night with Kirsty, or I'm going out with Gina, it's like, not so much now because mine are older, but it's like you'd start to make your way to sort of the front door. Don't touch this. Don't turn the oven on. Don't do this. Don't do. And then the thing you say when you're going through the door is often the thing you want them to remember above all things. And normally for that, it's a parent is don't fight, love each other, But it's when you go through the door, that's your last lesson that you want them to remember. And often we'll say, and remember, what did Jesus do? The last statement of Christ before he went into the journey through Gethsemane was servanthood. But he wanted them to know he wasn't just eternal king, ruler of all. He was a servant king. Remember those verses says he didn't come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom as many.
And in doing that, he was demonstrating who the Father was as well. Yeah. When you see Jesus, you see the Father, and the fact that our Father God is not some distant ruler, but he's one that comes alongside his people.
Us. Yeah, that's beautiful, eh? I think, you're right when you said, and we've said throughout this broadcast today, the Queen modelled those traits, that she was a servant in her heart and saw herself as a servant. And so in doing that, Jesus, King of Kings, was saying to his subjects, that room full of people, this is how you lead. You serve.
Yeah.
You've seen me do, now do the same.
Yeah.
But you know the other thing that's mind-blowing, Steve, it's like, surely that was enough to make the point. But then you go through the whole passion for Christ, you see the trial, you see the punishment, you see the crucifixion, you see the burial, and then, thank the Lord, the resurrection happens. And the next time, really, the disciples, a lot of them see him, what's he doing?
Yeah, making them breakfast again. It's again, it just plays with the mindset of who people believe Jesus should be or God would be.
Or what a ruler looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, Peter's gone back to fishing. He's like, well, that was a good stint of life. That was okay. And then suddenly he sees him.
Yeah.
And he is out the boat. He's like, Jesus makes this comment again, hey, have you caught any fish? And he thought, I know that voice.
Yeah.
And Peter again, first out the boat, swimming like a crazy man. And Jesus has got some coals going on the beach. He's got some fish going. And as the risen from the dead king, like everything I told you, boys, it's true. Here I am. Look, I wasn't lying. It's all true. He's suddenly not different, like, excuse me, bow down. Don't come near me.
Well, it's one of the things I exactly thought, because I was watching a programme where they were interviewing the prime ministers and talking about your experience with the Queen and everything like that. And one of the things that really struck them was that when they used to go to, I think it was Balmoral or one of the places, she actually used to cook a barbecue for them. Her and Philip, and they used to say it was so weird because you'd turn up and the Queen would be there and he'd be doing the barbecue and she'd be putting out the cutlery and all that stuff, and it was a thing of let us serve you. And I was watching that and I actually said to Chris, it's amazing, just the mirror of, you've got King Jesus who's there and putting on this barbecue in a sense, frying the fish and stuff for his people, and even in those little things you see, actually she modelled a life after him. But if that was the Queen and they're just struck by the Queen's cooking us a barbecue, how much more, like you say, the risen king, when they'd fully understood who he was, and they're still trying to get their heads around it, and there's that moment where he's actually still serving them and still being amongst it and just showing them love, natural everyday
the
love.
moment he's standing on the beach is epic. The last time I saw him was dying on a cross, being taken off a cross and put in a tomb. And suddenly he's standing before them and he's like, here I am, guys.
And most people would expect that that's the moment where you go, now do you get it? Do you understand who I am? Now you're going to serve me? He's like, no. Here I am.
Do you want some fish?
Yeah, let's make some breakfast.
Anybody fancy some mackerel?
Yeah.
We got Manny here. Where's Manny? Manny's a mackerel fisherman over there, just to give credit where it's due. He's brought mackerel to my house, But, it's Jesus standing there. Hey, caught some fish. I don't know if there's mackerel in the Sea of Galilee. Manny would probably know that. Is there,
He fished it.
But he's like, have some breakfast.
Yeah.
But then we read the Bible, and it says that at the great banquet of the Lamb, he serves.
The ultimate,
He serves. So, upper room, after the resurrection on the beach, in heaven at the banquet of the Lamb, Jesus is secure in serving those that should be serving him.
Yeah.
And I think he says to us today, be like me.
Yeah, it's a great lesson for leaders, isn't it, in any field, not just in the church, but in the business world anywhere, that leadership very much has been elevated to this point where it's all about you serve a leader, but just that model of what it is to actually be a servant leader and to be secure enough to be a servant leader.
Yeah.
That it doesn't mean it's just knowing who you are. And Jesus, like you said, was just so secure in who he was because he's Jesus.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's servant.
He knew you could take nothing from him.
Yeah.
Here's a couple of thoughts, just as we begin to bring this in for a close, and I hope you're enjoying today, wherever you're watching from. So glad that you've jumped in and joined us for our new season of Talking Church with The Forge, which is the Bible students of our new ministry school. And please be sending in your comments. Different people watching from Philippines, somebody watching from India, somebody saying it's so good to see you both back. Thank you very much. It's good to be back.
You.
That was a long summer.
Yeah.
So we've looked at Jesus, we've looked at Jesus, King of Kings, Eternal King. What does that look like for us as subjects? How do we serve Jesus with our daily lives?
Again, I think it's that thing coming back to ruling and reigning. Are we actually going to let him rule our lives? And actually then, if we are as kingdom citizens, actually following out what he has called us to do. You think in the olden times, and you were talking about the kings having power and all that kind of, they would often lead the people in a certain direction, and the people as subjects would go in that direction because, well, it's the king, it's royalty. And actually, again, it separates out, am I just a church attendee? Am I doing this because it's my tradition or what I was raised in? Or is Jesus actually king of my life? Where when I read the Gospels and he says, this is how I should be, this is how I respond to people, this is how, when I come up against my enemies, the world says this is how to respond, but actually my king says I'm to pray for them, I'm to pray blessing upon them, I'm to forgive them. Again, do we actually live as citizens under his rule and reign? Because that affects our everyday life. Otherwise, it's just theory. It's just,
It's true.
Yes, Jesus is my king. It's easy to sing songs, Jesus is my king. But actually, that's rubber hits the road on Wednesday when we're thinking, okay, this is what I want to do. What does Jesus say?
Yeah.
What does my king say about this specific issue or whatever it might be in my life?
And living that out. And yesterday, I was blown away by...
Before you get emotional.
Yeah, I know. I was blown away by how they honoured the Queen.
Yeah.
But the turnout of the people, Steve.
Yeah.
I mean, for the last few days,
Yeah.
people were queuing.
Yeah.
They were queuing, right? Sometimes you can't get people to church on time. I get that. But in that moment, people were going to London. We had a couple. We had Mandy and Sarah went up to London. But people were queuing, knowing that they were going to stand there for 14 hours.
Yeah.
And then there was a 6-hour delay that you couldn't even join the queue.
Yeah.
But millions, hundreds of thousands of people queued through the cold weather of the evening when the temperature dropped, just to pay their respect and walk past the Queen.
Yeah.
But also yesterday, you saw the streets just packed.
Yeah.
Packed.
Everywhere as well, wasn't it?
How does that affect us as Christians? Do we just look for moments where we honour Jesus as our living King?
Yeah.
Or do we walk in the knowledge of his kingship and be the subjects he's called us to be?
Yeah.
I think what you saw yesterday on the streets of England were loads of people that said, yeah, we are subjects.
Yeah.
We are subjects. What we really need is for Christians to take their place as subjects to Christ, right?
Yeah. And on a daily basis.
On a
not
daily
on big
basis.
momentous moments that we can all have. As Christians, you go through a season or you go to a conference or you do something. It's got to be day to day. It's got to be, okay, King Jesus, how does your authority and your rule in my life affect today? The next 24 hours, what does that look like? And surrendering to his rule and reign every single day.
Because we all love big moments, don't we?
Yeah.
You know,
it's how we're built.
On Sunday morning when we're worshipping together.
Yeah.
Maybe a conference that we went to where God really moved, you know. But it's not how we act in the big moments.
Yeah.
It's in the unseen, day to day, and the convictions of our heart.
Yeah.
But we wake up each day and we say, he is my king.
Yeah.
My king eternal.
Yeah.
I have a natural king. If you're from England, we have a natural king, Charles III, but above him is the king of all kings.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
And if you listen to him, the Holy Spirit will remind you of that on a daily basis.
And we have an opportunity throughout our day to respond not just to the acknowledgement of his reign, but his rule. Like you say, when he says forgive, when he says give, when he says let it go.
Yeah.
It's what we do in those unseen moments, because consecration is very much an unseen thing, isn't it, in our hearts?
Yeah.
That if we're only consecrated when crowds are watching or people are watching, are we truly consecrated? Yeah. Or is consecration something that is at its best in the unseen life that we live?
Yeah, absolutely.
But we don't do certain things, not because people are watching, but because he's king. Of our heart. Brilliant. Love that conversation. Anything else you want to say as we finish, Steve?
No, I think that just kind of sums up. Maybe the only thing I would say is just a challenge to people in this room or people watching. Is Jesus king symbolically, or is he actually king? Just think on that. Even if you just think on that for a week, I think the Holy Spirit will do a lot of work in your life as you do.
Because one of the things again, between a natural king and an eternal king is the natural queen or king is seen. Seen. Where the eternal king is unseen.
True.
So it's quite easy or easier to acknowledge and serve the reign of someone seen than someone unseen.
Yeah.
But Jesus said, more blessed are those who haven't seen
and yet believe,
yet follow me in my kingship, than those who have.
Yeah.
So actually, us not physically seeing him in this time and space is something that gives us more blessing.
True.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed that today. Obviously, we've been talking about the rule and reign of King Jesus, and also remembering and giving honour to an incredible, momentous day yesterday in Great Britain. Notice I said Great Britain. Across the Isles of Britain and Great Britain, where we celebrated the rule and reign of Queen Elizabeth II and the coming of Charles III as king. But we want to leave that thought with you today. Jesus, eternal King, servant king. Will we serve him as subjects? Will we merely acknowledge his reign and sing songs about him? Or will we allow his rule to be the rule of our lives, the things we do and the things we don't? To me, that's what takes us from being just believers who have experienced salvation to being those who are disciples and followers of Christ. Hope you've enjoyed today. Please come back and join us. Spread the word. Talking Church is back. Whole new season. And we'll see you same time, 10:30, same place next week. Bless you richly. God bless.